We're here today to interview Xolisa Ngwadla from the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research in South Africa, who yesterday put forward a proposal called the Equity Reference Framework. It's a framework that seeks to cover a number of the conceptual and operational approaches to equity and climate change.
Now, when one looks at an equity reference framework, firstly, one is trying to address the different paradigms underlying the negotiations on how should we structure a global budget. Should it be a top-down approach where the scientific requirement is translated into what individual nation states do, or should it be a bottom-up approach where you look at what nation states say they can do and then translate that back into whether they can achieve what is required by science or not? So that's the fundamental answer that an equity reference framework provides. And with understanding of the relative efforts that individual parties should undertake to shoulder that global responsibility, then we've got an opportunity of assessing what countries present as their commitments, be it to mitigation or adaptation finance and provision of finance and technology. The first set of inputs is around how do you reflect objectives for mitigation and adaptation in different temperature scenarios. I know that when it comes to mitigation, a lot has been done, but when it comes to adaptation, there hasn't been that political buy-in on what science says in terms of attributing climate change impacts on the basis of certain temperature scenarios. But I believe there's sufficient precedent and sufficient methodology, such as using a risk probability approach over the period to 2100, that can be used as a basis or as a proxy of developing a goal for adaptation. And then the second part is considering the various metrics that look at, for example, historical emissions, capability of countries, as well as development needs of countries. From that line of work, the relative efforts can be assessed, and it's on the basis of the two areas, what is needed by science and what relative efforts individual parties should undertake, that can help us in arriving at what can be objectively seen as fair. So if within the UNFCCC negotiations and in line with provisions of what we ought to do as reflected in the Doha decision under the ADP, there's an opportunity for SABSTA to request the IPCC at the end of this year to start undertaking this methodological work around the objectives as well as the criteria for assessing fair efforts, with a view that in the political process under the ADP negotiations, we can have a placeholder for consideration of this kind of approach by December 2014, such that by 2015, when we are negotiating the actual commitments of parties in the context of the 2015 agreement, then we can have that opportunity of using the review, the 2013 to 2015 review process, to integrate the equity reference framework as a basis of assessing how ambitious are the commitments that parties are putting on the table for implementation beyond 2020.